I am sipping from a very tiny cup.
It's
And
very tiny.
it is because it is full of a double shot of espresso.
Oh, nice. And I am sipping from a larger cup.
Mhm.
It is a Sharapa brand mug that Nick
Beautiful.
was very kind to send me one of, and um, it's Nespresso, so it's a bit fuller of a cup, but it's still very good coffee.
Yes. No, espresso is good. I know we've talked about coffee before. You know what? Sometimes I wonder. I wonder when people stumble into our podcast for the very first time with
Mm-hmm.
no knowledge of what our deal is. It's just called Clerically Speaking. And the
Yeah.
first thing they hear is, ah, here's the thing. I do not like black coffee.
Okay.
Not a fan of a black coffee. Like if you're gonna have like pour over coffee or drip
Yeah.
coffee, I want like a good bit of cream in it.
Okay.
But if it's just like a double shot of espresso, either I'll just like down it real quick or just sip on it like I'm doing now. And I love it. It's delicioso.
So I used to have to put a bit of milk and some sugar in my coffee, but Nespresso coffee is so good I don't need to add anything,
Hmm.
which is good. It's good for my health to not have to add those things.
Right.
Um, but it was actually kind of nice there. It's just like I felt like we are a morning show for a second, you know?
Yes.
Harrison and Anthony in the morning.
Beautiful. And like here's okay, so this is what's going on in my brain right
As we're
now.
sitting there with our coffee cups. Yeah.
Yes. Uh so I'm recording in the evening. I just it's like 5:30 over here. I just
Okay.
had a double shot of espresso. And this is my calculus. I do have some other things I have to get done today. So maybe I'll just stay up late. I'm always but then I have to wake up early in the morning because our adoration chapel is finally opening.
Mm-hmm.
So for a long time our little adoration chapel has been closed. It started off with COVID, but then we took time like hey, let's renovate this place.
Right.
So I'm gonna do like a little quiet mass by myself to kind of inaugurate the new adoration chapel,
Mm-hmm.
and also consecrate the host for adoration and that sort of thing. But while for daily masses at the parish, I feel an obligation to not be grumpy. For
Right.
just the angels and the saints, they can handle all my grumpiness. So I can have
Right.
myself a grumpy mass, and I'm okay
Yes.
with that.
Yeah. But the coffee doesn't wake you up to keep you up until like way late at night?
It
At
might,
night?
it might.
Or do you not care because this is number 2 of our 1 day recording, and so you're going to be up late tonight with the election stuff?
Yeah, so I'm not so worried about the election stuff. I figured, you know what? I will feel better about all the stuff I have to do tomorrow if I'm tired, but I know that I've gotten a lot of stuff done tonight.
Right.
So that's the calculus.
Okay.
And I'm sure a lot of people go through this in different ways, but I'm sick and tired of trying to do calculus about like how much sleep I should get. It's driving me crazy. So I finally took my sleep test. And one of the things I have to do
Mm-hmm.
tonight is put it in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Father Harrison, if they don't tell me I have some kind of sleep apnea, I am going to lose my mind. Because, okay, so today's an odd day, drinking a lot of coffee in the evening. Normally don't do that. But no matter how much I sleep, I'm always tired and I
Yeah.
can't handle it anymore. So if
Right.
they don't tell me something is concretely wrong with me, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Something else is going to be wrong with you. You're going to lose your mind.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to be something wrong with everybody because I'm going to tear this place down.
What if this is just the cross Jesus wants you to have?
Oh, could it not be though? Like, give me. Actually, you know what? That's a dangerous game to play. A dangerous game to ask for crosses, right? Right, right. But holy smokes. It's funny. I've been thinking about a thing now that you mentioned it. Way back when I was still in seminary and I was on
Mm-hmm.
retreat. And it was probably the most spiritually edifying retreat I had ever been on. It was an 8-day silent retreat. And I remember, same deal, always being tired, even back then, like 8+ years ago. And like, I'm praying really well and fighting through, like, we did 5 holy hours a day, or was it 4 or 5? Something like that. And I was tired for most of them, but my spiritual director told me just to go through it, and I was feeling the fruits of it. And I remember praying and asking God, please, one day, I would like to be able to like rest.
Right.
And I felt such a real consolation. It felt affirmative. But now I'm wondering if the Lord was affirming that I'm going to die one day or if I'm going to get my sleep apnea fixed. Because it could be either. It could be my eternal rest, Father Harrison. I might be tired forever.
So what's the delay getting it in the mail?
The delay getting in the mail is that I just haven't done it yet. So I need to do that tonight. So it's in the mail tomorrow, and then I can go about my business.
And then how long will it take for you to hear back?
No idea.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I also have to fill out the little form and say like, yes, I'm tired all the time. Now, luckily, I haven't like actually fallen asleep like while driving or anything, so
Mm-hmm.
that's good. But holy smokes! So that's I'm ironically by drinking this coffee tonight, I'll be able to get that done tonight and not sleep tonight, so that in the future I will be able to sleep.
Gotcha.
But for now, I'm all fired up and ready for some clerically speaking. So welcome to Clerically Speaking. I'm Father Anthony.
I'm Father Harrison. So I got a new addition to my rectory week and a half ago,
Okay.
2.5 weeks by the time this drops. So there's no chapel in my rectory. Now my rectory is not at the church. It's a few minutes away, not long, not far, but just a few minutes away from the church. So so my rectory, yeah. So, and there's no chapel here. It's a small house, uh, one master bedroom, two smaller bedrooms. And so when I got here, I transformed one of the bedrooms into a library where I put all my
Of course you
books.
did. Yeah.
Because, like, why wouldn't you want your books all in one place? I possibly didn't have to do that, but it's nice. Anyway, so I took the bed out. It's sitting in the garage now, all wrapped up and everything. And then I was like, but I need a place to pray.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to have the Blessed Sacrament here, and I'd like to have an altar. And I was kind of like, there's not a lot of room to do something here. And so I was like, what am I going to do? And then I talked to a parishioner. I said, you know what? Like, I can make it a library / chapel. I can make it both because, like, hey, there's nothing wrong with reading in front of the Blessed Sacrament.
No,
Anything, even study stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'll just do this with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking to a parishioner who's good at carpentry, and I said, hey, like, I'm looking to get like a little altar. Like, what I decided to do was the closet in that room. We took off the door and we put the altar in the closet. And then I said, yeah, so that's what I want to do. And then I want some way either for something to flip out or to pull out where I could celebrate Mass on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He says, oh, well, he goes, actually, Father, this is amazing. I've had this beautiful piece of I think it's like maple lion or something like that. Like, just super, super nice wood, right?
Yeah.
It's been sitting in my house for years. And I was always just like, God wants something with this wood. And now here you are asking. He goes, I just want to give it because I know what this is going to do. It's going to be a good thing to have. And so he goes, yeah, I'll get something together for you. And so he installed it 2 weeks ago, finally. And it's gorgeous. Oh my gosh, the wood is gorgeous. Just stunning wood. And yeah, so what it does is then there's a pullout. So then I can celebrate Mass. And I was thinking, not just, listen, actually, I could have probably celebrated just within the closet like that because I'm short, so my hands won't hit the top of the closet.
Sure, yeah.
But I was thinking, maybe I won't be here forever, and maybe there's a taller guy who will come later, and he might want to celebrate Mass, and he won't want to have to hit the ceiling and stuff. So now a pullout for actually saying Mass, and it's perfect. He's got it locked into place and everything. And then I emailed the bishop that night so for those who don't know, you can't just reserve the Blessed Sacrament anywhere you want.
No, you cannot.
That is that is a prerogative of the diocesan bishop or someone he delegates. And so I emailed my bishop that day. I said, hey, I've got a little altar in my room, in a spare room that I could celebrate Mass on for my day of rest and a place to pray. But I would very much like to have the Blessed Sacrament here. He goes, yeah, no problem. He goes, actually, it's a great idea so that if you get a hospital call and you're at home, you can just go grab the Eucharist and just go, right? Instead of having to drive to the church, turn off the alarm, find the tabernacle. Like, it's all a thing, right? Yeah. So he goes, yeah, no problem. So I on the Monday, because I was saying Mass at a friend's house on the Monday, so I didn't get saved. I actually haven't had a chance to say Mass on it yet. But I went to the church, got some supplies for the house for Mass kit and stuff, and then I brought a few hosts of the Eucharist home and put them in there. And I put some icons up kind of right now. I'm going to hang stuff eventually, but it's great. It's awesome. I'm so happy to have it.
Yeah, this is good. And you know, the other thing about having like a pull out option for your altar too is that it's nice to have that space
Hmm.
because like I have got a little adoration chapel set up in my rectory as well. The previous priest put that in there, and it's very nice. It's very nice. It suits my needs. But uh, the tabernacle is quite large because we
Right.
used one of the old because there we had tabernacles lying around all over the place. I had 7 churches. Um, and there's not a lot of space to celebrate mass, so it feels a little
Hmm.
cramped. But also, this is a thing like the size of the altar really matters for the comfort of celebrating mass. This is something people do not think
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because I have done home masses, or during the school year, I celebrate mass for my college kids at this Presbyterian college, and we use
Right,
their chapel. And they
right.
have like a table there, a fancy table that they use for kind of some props and stuff and whatever. But it's obvious that they're not Catholic because the table is too low, and it
Right.
kills my back. I have to squint. I'm
As
coming
you're like
old.
leaning over and yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You need a little extra height so you can say mass comfortably. Because then, like, the sacramentary is low and you can't see it so good. And
Hmm.
these are the things that matter in an altar. But yeah, I saw a picture of your altar. It looks super cool.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And what a delightful little piece of providence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I was just like, yeah, that was so cool.
or even just thinking about just altars uh, in general. Okay, so that piece of wood planted there however many years ago and grew up and then was cut down, and this guy saved it. Also, that one day you could celebrate the holy sacrifice of the mass on it.
Hmm.
There's something very Catholic about that. The
Yeah.
transformation of that piece of the earth that's now a part of where heaven meets earth. It's just very cool.
It is. Yeah. No, that's actually I didn't even think of it that deeply. So,
Right.
that's awesome. Yeah. No, it's nice, and it's nice to have the Eucharist as a neighbor. So now every time I walk by that room, it's actually like directly across from my room. I just make a little sign of the cross if I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going in, just to be aware of that he's there. Still
Yeah.
need to get like a little lamp of sorts for the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to say the presence is there, obviously, and I still need to clean up some books in there. There's piles of books on the floor still that I need to organize. But it's great to have. I'm so happy to have it, and it's great. So yeah, Jesus is awesome.
I agree. I agree that Jesus is awesome. You know what
This
is
is me.
less awesome?
Yeah, what? Yeah, go
Go,
ahead.
go, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say I always have a hard time landing the plane. I was realizing this doing my book edits. So like, you need to add something to your conclusion here to actually make it a conclusion. And I'm like, yeah, I actually really suck at landing the plane. So I just like rambling on until I can figure a way to shut up.
That reminds me. There,
Yeah.
there have been 2 times where I have come to the end of my homily or the end of my thoughts in a daily mass and literally had no idea what to say, but knew it was time to end. And then there was an awkward pause that was longer than a normal pause, and I've literally ended my homily before with just saying the end. Because I am a firm believer that when it comes to homilies, it's better to crash the plane than to never land it. So
That's a good point.
sometimes an awkward ending is okay.
Yeah, I've done a couple like where I'm thinking like, oh yeah, that's a neat idea. No, I'm done.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta be careful. You gotta watch out
Yeah,
for yourself.
yeah, yeah.
Um, time for the Summa Tweetologica. Because I have no idea how to end that segment.
Well, because I totally destroyed your transition. So, anyways,
Uh, the
good
Summa
time.
Theologica was St. Thomas Aquinas' summary of theology. The Summa Tweetologica is our summary of things we found interesting on Twitter. And so, this is a little late for spooky season because now we're in Thanksgiving season, the real Thanksgiving. I will take no questions. But this is from Jane Coaston at CJJane87, and
Mhm.
she says, I am staunchly anti horror movie. I do not want to be afraid for recreational purposes. I understand this is a minority position here, but I stand regardless. Oh, but here I stand regardless. So I know that there's some other priests on Twitter who have recently written about the goodness of horror movies in the Catholic sense, and I didn't read that because I didn't care. The thing is, I cannot stand horror movies. We talked about this a little bit when we reviewed The Exorcist, how uh, hesitant I was to do that,
Mhm.
because I don't like the feeling of being afraid. Um,
Mhm.
I don't like I don't like it. Like, it freaks me out.
Hmm.
I am not a fan of these things. Now, I think, like, as we talked about in the Exorcist movie, the horror genre can be used very artistically and to tell an important
Hmm.
story. And
Hmm.
some things are scary.
Yep.
That's the reality of the thing. And if art is supposed to depict reality and help you have a deeper insight into it, certainly horror has a place.
Hmm.
Um, but the last horror movie I ever saw willingly was The Ring.
Okay.
Do you remember The Ring? The lady
I've
comes
never
out of
seen
the
it. Yeah, I've
TV.
never seen it. Yeah, I've never seen it. I know what you're
Yeah,
talking about, but I've never seen it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So me and my buddies, I think we were in high school, or maybe we were in middle school. I don't know. Whenever The Ring came out, and we all watched it, and my buddy's dad drove us there, so we couldn't drive yet. And I remember my buddies like kind of like hiding in their hoodies, kind of watching it. I'm watching the whole thing. I'm like, this isn't that scary. You guys are a bunch of wimps. Anyway, afterwards, the dad takes us to go get some donuts or something after the movie, and I'm just kind of bragging about how it wasn't scary or anything. And then out of nowhere, dad driving the car, turns around. I'm in the back seat, grabs my leg, and screams. And I just started crying. Like, all of the repressed fear, all of the macho stuff, like, got destroyed. I had never been so scared in my entire life. I just started weeping profusely. And he felt very bad about it because he was just playing like a little prank on me. But it destroyed me. No
That is
interest in
such a
seeing horror
that
movies
is
ever
such a
again.
that's such a dad thing to do.
And it was right and just. I was bragging way too much. He felt
Yeah.
very bad about it, but he shouldn't
Yeah.
have because I deserved it completely.
Yeah.
But
That's
ever
funny.
since then, I'm like, no horror movies for me.
So I've seen some scary movies. Like, I remember seeing Scream and stuff like that. Because it was becoming a bit of a thing when I was in high school in the late '90s. It was becoming a bit of a genre. Um, Actually, okay. When we just remind me, I want to talk about Cabin in the Woods for a second in a minute.
Okay.
Um, but I'm not a bit like I like that tweet because I'm just like, yeah, I'm not a the idea of just getting afraid for fun. I'm like, how is that fun? Right? Like for example, I was willing to suffer it for The Exorcist when I first saw it because I knew there was a deeper story going on that, yeah, this movie's going to scare the crap out of me and I'm going to sleep with the lights on for a week, but it's worth it because there's something true being said here. But like, and I remember seeing Scream, but like, whenever, even when I'm still today, when I'm in the theaters, I'm just kind of like, sometimes when like they're trying to build up a little bit of a surprise moment, I'm just like, covering my ears and just trying to just
Kind of
hope and
half looking away,
half
like
looking
closing one
away.
eye.
I'm like, this isn't fun. Like, why is this cool? Right. So yeah, so I don't really go see them much because I just have no desire to be shocked and awed. I don't want to have a heart attack while watching a movie. Right. But one of the most interesting, and I've tweeted about this before. One of the most interesting movies I've ever seen is Cabin in the Woods. Have you seen that one?
No, I don't even know the premise.
So it's a Joss Whedon film
Mm-hmm.
about these four high school students who go to a cabin in the woods. It's like the jock, the virgin, the stoner, and what's the fourth archetype? I'm forgetting the fourth archetype right now. But
The nerd.
oh no, and the cheerleader. Yeah. And it's a bit of like the movie actually starts like you think it's a horror movie, but it's actually like a meta narrative on top of the whole horror movie genre. And it's actually, I mean, it's a very interesting film. I actually it's what helped me understand why I hate Joss Whedon so much as
I
a
was waiting
filmmaker.
for it. I'm like, when are you going to tell me that you hate Josh Whedon? You can't say his name without spitting at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. So because the whole film is really actually because like the whole if you haven't seen it, kind of want to know what it's about. It's kind of like actually this cabin exists because you need these four type of people to be sacrificed every year so that these gods can remain appeased and they don't destroy the earth.
Fascinating.
Yeah, but the end of the film comes. So no, if you don't want spoilers, just fast forward for a moment. Whereby the stoner and the cheerleader, I think, anyways, and one of the women of the film, but or I can't remember. I'm pretty sure. Oh no. Anyways, one of them.
Yeah.
I know. I definitely remember the stoner. They're kind of confronted with this whole narrative, and they say, "Listen, you have a choice. You can offer your life as a sacrifice to save the world. Like you're going to die one way or another.
Right.
So you can either offer your life as a sacrifice, or these gods won't be appeased, and they're going to be freed, and they're going to destroy the earth." And the stoner kind of just lights up a doobie, and he goes like, essentially, like he's like, "Let him come," right? And he's kind of okay with the destruction of the world.
Hmm.
And this is the whole thing, because Whedon understands that the whole essence of Western civilization is built upon the idea of sacrifice, and so he's trying to undermine the whole Western narrative, and he's trying to subvert it in this film. And I saw that as one of his principal projects as a filmmaker, and it's why I don't like him.
That's
I mean,
fair.
it's interesting. It's fascinating. Like I liked it in the sense that it got me to think, but I also can't stand his narrative style and stuff like that, because he's just always trying to subvert.
Gotcha.
Like, there comes a point when subversion gets to be too much. Sorry, that was kind of off the beaten path, but
No, that's good because I think that's something that happens a lot now in art. That it's always easy to deconstruct something. It's
oh
much
yeah,
more difficult to make something.
yeah, exactly. So, so this one comes from Ignatius Insight at Ignatius Insight. And it's a little quote from an article they put together on dioceses offer free internment to encourage proper burial of cremated bodies. Joseph Hanneman of Catholic World Report on the Lay Them to Rest program in Madison, Wisconsin, and similar diocesan programs in Milwaukee, Detroit, Seattle, Denver, Lincoln, and other places. And I mean, it's just this idea that they're offering free places to bury people just to ensure that the cremated remains are buried properly. And I brought this on because I think this is an important thing to remind Catholics about, because I've actually been surprised how many people don't actually know about this stuff. And I'm sure you've encountered this as a priest. Oh no, we're just going to put mom on the shelf, on the fireplace, and stuff like this, right? Now, actually, it's interesting. In COVID, I'm a little bit more forgiving because people just want to wait until the family can come together to bury.
Sure. Okay.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's different. That is actually different, and that's fair. But so yeah, this is the idea: is that you're supposed to be buried. You cannot be scattered as a Catholic. You cannot just sit on someone's fireplace for 20 years. You cannot be made into jewelry. That's a thing. If you think I'm joking, people use cremated remains to make jewelry so they can have a little bit of mom with them or a little bit of dad. Because the idea is like the whole point of burial is that it's a sign of respect for the body, right? And there is a culture, like the culture tends towards cremation more now than full body burial, although I have zero desire to be cremated. I'm full body because I'm an Italian.
Beautiful.
Right? That's what Italians do. But the idea is that no, they need, and like, I think I know you're going to bring this up because like, I'll let you do that because like, but it's just, you need a place to go to mourn and stuff like this, right? You need there's all sorts of reasons why having a stable place of burial, and there's something to the whole process of the burial itself that is a closure of grief to an extent and stuff like this. So there's a whole bunch of things to it, and I think it's important to realize. So I thought that was a really neat initiative that these dioceses are taking into place to try and just encourage people to say you need to bury the ashes.
Yeah.
The remains. Sorry, not the ashes. The remains.
Right. There's definitely, a lot of biblical and theological reasons to have someone buried, but usually what's in the foremost of my mind are the pastoral and personal reasons.
Right.
Because oftentimes there is a refusal to acknowledge the reality
Yeah.
that someone has passed away. And not saying it's an easy thing to do under any circumstances. It's not. But it's a very necessary thing to do.
Right.
Also, and this was a story I heard. What if something happens to the house that the ashes are in?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
this is a thing that has happened. That there was a house fire, there were ashes there,
Right.
and now it's gone.
Right.
There needs, yes, to be the acknowledgement. Also, there having a place to visit. This whole
Mm-hmm. It's huge.
yeah, and the whole scattering of the ashes leads to, I think, a kind of I don't know if Gnosticism or uh, definitely a denial of the body. and the
Yeah.
importance of the body. I think
Yeah.
that's going to play.
Yeah.
Now, I understand completely that cremation is certainly for many people like the only financial option.
Right.
So that's
Right.
why the church allows this. That the only reasons why the church didn't allow it is because a lot of pagan cultures burn the body because either in mockery of Christianity or because it signaled a lack of respect for the resurrection, right?
Right. Right.
And that's not so much a cultural thing. At least it wasn't. Now I feel like it's creeping back in.
Yeah, that's the
Um,
thing.
it's
And
kind of
that's
creeping back in.
and
But
it's kind of creeping back in and even to Catholics.
right, it is. It is. But like, if this is a financial thing, this is what we have to do. There's nothing wrong with that, so you don't need to feel guilty about that.
Right.
But yeah, but also I like this that there is a place offered because
Yeah.
one of the corporal works of mercy is to bury the dead.
Yeah.
So it's good that a Christian organization is making this more feasible for people who don't have the financial means.
Exactly.
Dying is insanely and stupidly expensive. The
Way too
prices you
expensive.
pay for opening and closing a grave are insane. So the fact that they have this is important work. I'm glad it's happening.
Yeah, it's so my last parish. This is really interesting. This is part of the interesting stuff. So smaller town. We actually had the parish had a cemetery. We actually had to increase the prices, not so much just to be like to make the place long term viable to help like supply the perpetual fund, right? Like so cemeteries need a perpetual fund to ensure perpetual care.
Yes.
And so you need to create enough amount to pay interest, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, so you actually had to because when I got there, they were still selling full body plots for $125,
Whoa.
which is super cheap.
Yeah.
But in that town, you go and get a full body plot for still like $600.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's actually really cheap.
That's actually not too bad.
That's actually really good because like in Victoria, you're looking at $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for a full body plot. In Nanaimo, you're paying about $3,000 for a plot, like a spot in a columbarium. While in Port Alberni, it was only like $250. Like there was a part of me saying, maybe I should just get buried in Port Alberni. Like, it'll be cheap. But yeah, so like the costs vary according to towns and stuff like this. So it is expensive. I mean, like, but people like it's so expensive now. Like a funeral can cost like $25,000-$30,000 when everything's said and done, and that is that's not cheap. And it's not something most of us plan for. Right? The last thing I want to think about is putting money aside for death. Right. So yeah, it's a good work though. I'm really happy to hear diocese is taking this initiative. It's a part of the corporal work of mercy, and that they're finding ways to provide for this in a way that gives people a place to. And I think that's the big thing. Like that's such a huge thing is the place to visit. I know where I can go to pray for my loved ones. That's huge.
Yeah,
it's huge. So yeah. Cool.
All right, let's move on to presbyteral exhortations. This is how you sometimes bring things to the podcast because you're working them out in your brain?
Yep.
That's what I'm doing this time.
Nice.
There's been something that's been noodling around in there for a while, and I want to talk about it.
Okay.
So a few weeks ago, we were on the Catching Foxes podcast.
Yes, we were.
We were on the Catching Foxes podcast, and it was a long boy. It was It was like an hour and 40 minutes long.
Yeah.
And we both know Luke and Gomer. We have a lot of respect for the guys. We love the guys. They're great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And very much in the habit of their podcast, we began talking about one thing, and we ended up talking about something completely different.
Right.
And I recommend people go listen to it. I really do.
Yeah. It's what was the name of the episode again? I
think it's Gomer yells at priests or something.
Let's find it out here. Gomer yells at priests with clerically speaking.
Yes, exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
And what happened in the course of that podcast was that the guys really gave voice to a lot of pain that many people in ministry and close to the church have experienced through priests. And they were able to give voice to that. And it was messy.
Very messy.
But
I couldn't see it going any other way.
Right. Here's the thing. The more and more I think about this, I don't think there's been a lot of opportunity for these kind of conversations where priests and lay people can have a conversation about something very difficult as brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that episode was a first step in that.
Mm-hmm.
it was only a first step, but I think it was important. I think what we kind of learned from that is that, man, there's a lot of stuff because of all the scandals, because of the daily, honestly, scandals of stuff that happens in parishes, not like the sexual stuff, but just um,
Incompetence.
incompetence or mediocre priests or this sort of thing
Yeah.
that cause real hurt.
Hmm.
And there's not really a good space to talk about that stuff,
Right.
to have a conversation. And so that's what began to happen with that podcast.
Right.
So that's why I think it's very good. That's why I think it's very important. I think
Right.
it's important for priests to hear. I think a lot of people who listened to that um, felt a sense of relief because real pains were being voiced. So
Yeah.
I completely and utterly endorse the episode.
Yep.
But it got me thinking because one of the questions that they asked us was, what does it mean to be a good priest?
Yeah.
And then you, Father Harrison, were like, wait a second, how about you tell us?
Right.
And they named all kinds of stuff, all kinds of stuff. Um, but one of the comments kind of got stuck into my brain was that a priest exudes a love for
Hmm.
the liturgy
Hmm.
and for prayer.
Hmm.
And I was thinking about that after the next Sunday Mass I did. I was at St. Mary's Church. It was one of our first indoor masses at St. Mary's Church. Beautiful church.
Hmm.
I was super happy to have Mass back in a church, especially just in particular one that beautiful.
Hmm.
And I was super happy to see people sitting in pews, even though, they were wearing masks and they were sitting apart from each other. And there's a weirdness in that. There just is.
Hmm.
And I was happy to say Mass. I thought I preached well. I thought I prayed pretty
Hmm.
well. But then I asked myself, was I exuding anything? Like, was
Right.
I exuding a love for
Yeah.
the priest? What does that mean?
Was it coming out of your
Was it
pores?
coming out of my pores? Was I just like
You
laser beaming
you
people
just
with
yeah,
holiness?
you just sweat holiness, right?
Right? And like I'm making a little bit of fun of
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
comment,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
it's getting at something. It's like, what does it mean to be a good priest? What does it
Hmm.
mean to be a holy priest?
Hmm.
Because it's something that we want, right?
Hmm.
You want to be holy, right, Father Harrison?
Absolutely.
And not just holy. You
Oh,
want to be a holy priest.
and yeah, and I'll be honest. Like there are days where that question can get lower, right? Like you're not intentional, but it's like it's just you can forget about the question sometimes. But you do in the end. It's what you want. You wouldn't because we wouldn't be continuing in this if we didn't want it.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I was sitting there in my chapel, just like praying about this question and thinking about the whole conversation and everything.
Hmm.
And I was like, maybe it's realizing we're not.
Hmm.
Because I think so often we place holiness on our talents or the strength of our personality. You know, um, that I am a holy priest if I'm really good at counseling people,
Hmm.
or if I'm a really good preacher,
Hmm.
or if I'm that, or if I say or use really holy words with people
Hmm.
that are like, oh wow, that was amazing.
Right.
Um, but that's not holiness,
Right.
right? Uh, like I don't know how you can be a good preacher without holiness,
Hmm.
right? Because
Yeah.
in good preaching, you are listening to the word of God spoken to you
Hmm.
through the readings and your reflections and your studies, and you're telling that to your people, and you're doing that in love. And so all that definitely has to do with holiness. Um, but here's some questions. Here's some questions
Hmm.
that I struggle with. Um, yeah, one, what is holiness for a priest? Um, but two is how much are we allowed to sin?
Hmm.
And not like I'm looking for like, hey, tell me the
Yeah.
sins I can do as a priest.
Yeah.
I'm real excited to get some
What's the
sinning in,
limit? Yeah. What's the
right?
limit? Yeah.
Because even if we say, oh, priests are just people,
Hmm.
even if we say priests are sinners like us, and even if that's true, which it is,
Hmm.
there's still this thing that we can't mess up like other people are allowed to mess up.
Hmm.
Like if a married couple, if there's infidelity in that, huge amount of pain, right?
Hmm.
Huge amount of suffering. But there's still the opportunity for reconciliation and the marriage to continue.
And often they want to.
And often they want to, right?
Yeah.
And going through that process may indeed make the marriage even stronger than it was before. Now, of course, I'm using one very vague example. Sometimes separation is necessary because
Hmm.
of abuse or something
Yeah. There's
else. Like,
all. I mean, yeah, it's a
right.
complicated thing, right?
But the same isn't true for a priest.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm thinking a lot of thoughts out loud. So
Yeah.
I'm a mess. This is going to be a messy conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying priests should be allowed to go have a relationship, and that's a great thing. No, no, no. But I think it's an important question. How much can we be forgiven for
Hmm. Yeah.
and keep our priesthood?
Right. I mean, and it's interesting. I think I have a few ideas. One I might table one for a bit later in the
Yeah.
episode here, but how do I want to put this? I think a lot of it has to do not with forgiveness, but with liability. If you know what I mean. Like it's
Right.
just like, um, and I mean, again, it depends on things, but but I find a lot of time. I was thinking about this the other day. I'd love to give a homily one day on the perfect priest,
Yeah.
right? Because this is the thing. Unfortunately, I guess I find that a lot of people have these ideals of what they want their priest to be, but the problem is no one man can ever fulfill people's ideal because we can't. Like it's like saying I expect my spouse to fulfill everything I want about my life. It doesn't happen. But for some reason, we hold this up even for priests, and we think the ideal priest will pray 10 hours a day, but will spend 20 hours in the office, right?
Right.
The perfect priest will be out on the street corners evangelizing, but close to every family in his parish. The ideal priest will have a radical love for the poor, but work to build up the institution of the parish. Like it's just like these things that, I mean, they're not opposed, but we want these things of our priests, or what I want a good priest to be, when no man can ever do all those things. And every priest is going to have his strengths and his weaknesses. And that, I guess, there has to be some patience and understanding in that the priest is not going to always be perfect. He's going to do his best. But I guess I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but I do find a lot of times that patience isn't offered.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't fulfill my ideal, and so I'm blocking you out right away.
Yeah.
And that's rough.
And it's not even just blocking you out right
Yeah.
away, right? Because we've all heard this. It's I'm leaving the church because of you now,
Yeah.
or I'm never coming to this parish again, or I'm never donating to this parish again.
Yeah.
Because something about you didn't pick the right candles for the altar,
Yeah.
or even things more serious than that, right?
Yep.
Or even like, are you gonna say something?
Well, it's yeah. I think part of it again is we have to understand and I think this is kind of getting back to what we talked about a few weeks ago around how we ought to understand parish life. That we need to start understanding it as family, and that the title father actually has a lot of meaning to that. You show me a family where a dad has been perfect, but you still love them, right? And so that requires a patience. Like I think, but it's like also saying like I want a priest who, but at the same time we shouldn't, like for priests we shouldn't be trying to. We should avoid a certain perfectionism that wants to make everyone happy. We should avoid a way of being that is going to bend over backwards to the point of killing their humanity so they can appease every single desire in a parish. It's not possible. And it's also about, but then at the same time, on the part of the laity, I think it's a part recognizing like every priest you're going to get is the one you have. That's the reality that's been placed in front of you. And to recognize that maybe, yeah, the last priest was really good at this, but this one's really good at this. And to be grateful for both. And to be okay with, yeah, do what they're gonna not be great at this, but and then to have forgiveness because they're trying to do the best they can for you. I mean, I'll be honest, like I find it's pretty rare about this. Again, I know, not everyone's had great priests sometimes, but my experience, generally. I mean, and again, maybe I've just been spoiled in my diocese. We don't have a lot of priests, but the ones we have are super devoted to their people and give them of themselves completely, I think. And so I think most priests are just trying to do their best to serve the people of God.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
and I think it's a lot of truth. And I think, I mean, without saying that there's a lot of priests who are super broken
Yeah,
and cannot be the priests they need to be for people
yeah,
and will do a lot of harm in very
yes,
mundane ways, but a lot of harm.
yeah,
But one of the things we were talking about in that other episode was one of the guys was comparing um, his love for his bride with a
right,
priest's love
right,
for his bride.
yeah,
And here's the thing, and this is something that I used to feel guilty about while I was in seminary, but now I feel very strongly about
right,
that we push the spiritual analogy of the priest being married to the church way too far.
yes, yes. I have things to say, so yes, go on though.
Okay.
Sorry.
Because you and your bride that you're married to, you can share each other's pains and failings completely, and you should.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to do that, that would be spiritual abuse
Mm-hmm.
because you're not just my bride, you're also my child.
Mm-hmm.
And while a father can expect a certain, or eventually, some kind of reciprocation from a child, I think any parent will tell you, even though, yeah, they know their kids love them, that it's mostly you giving, right?
Yeah.
It
Yep.
has to be. It has to be.
Yep.
You can't you have a little 3-year-old girl. You should not tell her about all of the problems you had at work, or the financial things that you have, or your
Or
own personal struggles with sin. That would
or the
not
stuff
be
going on
healthy.
between mom and dad.
Right,
Right.
right. That would be bad.
Yeah.
And uh, that's my initial thought about that.
Okay.
You're gonna say something, yeah?
So yeah, the reason. So we have to remember what analogy means in the Catholic tradition. Analogy means that for every similarity, there's always a greater difference, right? And we also have to remember that it is kind of part of the spiritual tradition that the priest is married to the church, but he's married to the church, not the particular parish, right? When we are offering, for example, when we're doing the office of readings, we're praying for the universal church. Yes, our people. Yes, we are obviously including in a special way our local people and everything, and we're interceding on a local behalf. But actually, that marriage of the priest to the church is not this particular church because because this is where the analogy starts to break down. When you get moved as a pastor, then you've entered into divorce, right? Because I'm expressing my love for the universal church in this particular place, but the bridegroom relationship is with the universal church. But it's an analogy. It's not it's and so there is a similarity about the form the love takes, but it's not exactly the same. It can't be, right? Because for a lot of the reasons you've mentioned, I cannot share my heart with my parishioners.
No, not in the way that the
Not
bride
in
and
the
groom can.
right. Exactly. No, and actually, I mean, because this is the weird thing is actually it's reversed. The parishioners share a lot of their heart with you,
Yeah, they do.
and out of care for everyone, I keep that private. I take that in, but my love is expressed in not sharing things so that I can love everyone equally. Um, so that nobody gets special treatment, no one gets special access to father or whatever, or special relationship or anything. You have to be kind of above board, which means you also have to have a distance, right? Like, so this gets back to our episode about virginity, right? This is why celibacy is so important, I think, to the priesthood today. It allows us to have the distance that is actually a deeper love, which will absolutely which will then, when you see things from a distance, you'll recognize, okay, I need to be close to this person right now for their sake, and close to that person, or I need to be distant here and I need to be close there, because you're doing it all out of it as an act of love for everyone. But we have to remember it's an analogy, and so when there's an analogy, there's some similarities, but there's always more differences than there are similarities. And so you can't just take the blueprint of marriage and just impose it on the priesthood,
right?
Because that's it. Rather, the blueprint is the way Jesus loves. That is the blueprint of the spousal analogy in the priesthood. That as Jesus related to the crowds and to the disciples, etc., because that's his, but it's, everything is for the church, and we are united to Christ. We are sacramentally united to Christ the head and the holy orders. And so we are actually sharing in that love for the universal church.
Yeah, but even that
Yeah.
analogy and even spiritual reality fails at a certain level.
Okay.
Christ can share himself with his people in a way that we can't.
Right. Yes. Right. Uh-huh.
Um,
Well, I'm not talking about sharing the heart. I'm talking about just self-sacrificing love.
right, that
Right. That's what
aspect,
I mean.
yeah.
Right. Like, it's living the crucified life, but it doesn't mean an access to intimacy with Father in terms of knowing his heart and stuff like this.
Yeah.
That's not for people. People don't have a right to that.
Yeah. And it's not even that they just don't have
Right.
a
Okay.
right to
Maybe.
that,
Yeah.
is that it would be unfatherly for us to do that.
Exactly.
Right. And
Yeah.
this is why friendships with a priest can be very tricky.
Mm-hmm.
If someone becomes or is a close friend of mine, someone that I can share things with,
Mm-hmm.
as only a close friend can, uh, they are sacrificing my fatherhood
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that I will not be able to be father to them in the same way that I can to another parishioner.
Mm-hmm.
That they have, and it's a beautiful sacrifice. Like, yeah, I can still be priestly for them. I can still baptize their kids and that sort of thing. Still offer mass for them. There can be fatherly aspects, but I'm not going to be a father in the same way for them.
Mm-hmm.
The relationship is going to be different. There is and this is why I think it only happens with like very, very close friends,
Mm-hmm.
that the priest, and this is something else I want to talk about, the priest kind of steps down in order to be friends with this person. Not that the priest
Mm-hmm.
is better,
Mm-hmm.
but I am letting go of some of my fatherhood for that person so
Right.
that we can be friends.
Yeah.
So there's a sacrifice on really their part when you enter into friendship, a deep friendship with a
Yeah.
priest.
Right.
Uh, and that's really like I'm blessed that that's happened naturally in my life. I've been blessed with
Yeah.
that, and it's very helpful if a priest has friends even beforehand. But I've even made very close friends as a
Mm-hmm.
priest. They haven't been my parishioners,
Yeah.
but there's a sacrifice on that level too. And there's a question like floating above. I'm just gonna keep throwing stuff out there, and
Yeah.
maybe one day it'll make sense, or maybe we can make it make sense. Um, like how I don't think that's clericalism.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's the question that's kind of hovering over, like how much of this is healthy or
Right.
good or how it's supposed to be. Is this how it's supposed to be?
Right.
I think so. Um, um, because it's when you have several hundred, or especially when you have several thousand people who are your own parishioners,
Yeah.
uh, and you're supposed to care for all of their souls.
Yeah.
Um, you have some people in your congregation that are saints and probably have no idea that they are. You
Mm-hmm.
have some people who are incredibly broken and have no idea that they are.
Right.
And I have to discern not only what you tell me,
Mm-hmm.
but also what is the reality behind what you tell me.
Right.
That a lot of people act not knowing what they actually desire.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody may think externally that I just want a spiritual father, when I
Right.
can tell that what they actually want is something that I cannot give them.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to have to back away from that person for their own
Mm-hmm.
sake, but it will be a pain for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I may or may not be able to explain that to them, depending on the situation.
I know. And that's, yeah.
And sometimes, like, it becomes like the loving thing for me to do is to hurt you.
Yeah.
And that's crazy.
Well, I mean, loving, and not in the hurt in the sense of like intentionally, but that
No.
hurt's going to arise because
Right.
of maybe the attachment or the you've created, or the idea you've created in your mind about the relationship with the priest or my relationship to my faith or whatever, that you recognize that when you do this action, you're not hurting them, but because of something they've done, or something they've bought into, they're going to be hurt, right? Does that make sense? Or
Yeah.
yeah,
And then you, as a priest, have to let yourself be crucified in that moment.
yep,
Because you have to watch them. It's almost a Marian aspect to the priesthood that
mhm,
you have to watch them suffer for a greater good,
yeah,
and you can't fix it.
yeah.
Um,
So okay, so I wanted like, this is a question. You know, when we were kind of texting about this a bit, this brought up something to me because I think what do we understand? Like, there's the first question of what do we understand by the word good? Like, do we mean like morally upright? Do we mean a priest who's just giving his whole heart? Do we mean someone who kind of lives everything? And like, and I'm gonna say one thing. I think, especially for pastors, I think there are some basic qualities that a priest ought to be living that I think we can legitimately hold a priest up to. Okay, what are the three offices of a priest? And when he's a pastor,
uh,
he's
he's a
sanctifier,
priest, sacrament. Yeah.
sanctify. That's one of
Yeah.
his jobs, to make holy, right?
Right.
The second one is to teach,
Teach.
right? And the third one is to govern,
Right.
right? These are the three aspects of the life of a pastor. Um, Associates don't govern, right? You guys have that great blessing. um, and I think actually a pastor ought to be at least attempting to live these three things. He'll be good at some of them and not so great at the other ones, but he has to do them regardless, because to ignore one of them, I think, is to not enter into the reality of being a pastor. And you're actually ignoring a way of loving your parish,
Yeah.
right? I say that because actually sometimes, like, I listen, most priests, the last thing they want to do is administration. But actually, and it was actually interesting. We had Father Josh on last year. He was talking about how paperwork is actually an exercise, like the sacrificial life of the priest. I was like, it was a beautiful way to help me understand, like, this is why. And actually, it was really a transforming thing for me to see. Yeah, I have to embrace this. I have to govern well. So I think in that regard, as long as a priest is attempting those things, you have a good priest. You know,
Sure.
okay. But so that's what I mean. Like,
Well,
good in the sense of like he's attempting to live out the office of pastor.
yeah. But I think
What?
good has to. I think it also. Oh man, we're getting to something else. I want
I
to
know.
get to something else too. Um, you. I think there's a possibility of someone who wants to,
Hmm.
and is trying to, and thinks they are, but they're
Right.
too broken to,
Right. Yes.
and that
And
doesn't
that's
make a
and
good priest.
no, it doesn't. And that's why I'm saying, like, I think these categories can be a way to hold a priest accountable.
Yes.
Right. That's what I
Yes.
mean by
Okay.
this. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
say,
You can
like, when
legitimately
the
hold.
yeah, a priest be like, oh, I think I am. And it's like, well, actually, no, Father. Our finances are in shambles because you haven't been talking about it with the parishioners or whatever it is. And it's like it's okay to say, hey, we need you to do this for us because you're the only one who can, right? Um, so, anyways, but
But the difficult thing for people
yeah,
is that there's always going to be that power imbalance.
absolutely,
Like
absolutely,
bringing that to a priest for a parishioner is a very difficult thing to do
absolutely,
because the priest might not handle that well. He may lash out.
right.
And it's not just then a person lashing out,
I
it's
know.
this image of the father lashing out, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep throwing stuff
Well,
into this mix to,
okay.
because we only have
Can
2 more minutes.
yeah,
Okay,
can
go
I
ahead.
bring one more thing into it?
Yeah.
Because this is the other thing. Like, so, like, I understand. Like, I think there's a baseline, I guess, is what I'm just trying to get at. There is a baseline of understanding what is, at least, this is what a priest should be doing. Okay. But no priest is perfect.
Sure.
And this is where the paradox comes in. That, and I think, like, we need to be accepting of the fact that a priest will never be able to do everything. That he's going to have to make choices and sacrifices what he's going to do and not do, and that actually, in sometimes his own weakness and nothingness, is the place where grace starts to work its most. So, can I read a?
Weakness is different than sin, though.
Yes, exactly, absolutely.
And this is the tricky part about it. What do we do about a priest's sin? And to concretize it
Yeah,
in a different way, um, I have known priests who have sinned in ways that many would say they're unfit for ministry, and they may indeed be correct.
right.
How do I, as a
Yeah,
priest, really
yeah,
love that person who is my brother?
right.
because they're probably, and for understandable and practical and prudent reasons, not going to receive love from the people as well.
Hmm.
And how, when I see them struggle, when I see them despair in their own sin, and it can be a bunch of different sins,
Hmm.
a part of me wonders, is there any forgiveness for them?
Hmm. Hmm.
Or do they just have to be cast out into the outer darkness? Um, like I said, I'm not even talking about I'm not talking about anything with children, anything with
Hmm.
minors.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I mean, that's a question that arises as well, and it's a
Right.
very
You're
difficult one.
making a distinction between like maybe a sin, a personal sin that priest is struggling with, and something that becomes abusive and harmful and stuff. Like
Right, and there
you're
may be a
saying,
personal sin that,
obviously, if someone's doing something harmful,
right,
like yeah, you got to
you
get rid of
can't
them.
be in ministry, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just like if a spouse is abusive, you can't stay with that spouse, right?
Right. Yeah.
But what if a priest's sin hampers his ability to teach, govern, sanctify?
Right.
What if that priest, like, what do we do with them? Because I can tell you that even if that priest goes through a dark night,
Hmm.
even if they are reformed, and like I said, in these other aspects, they can be. Maybe they don't get to be a priest the way they want to anymore.
Right. You can still be a priest, but maybe not in a parish or something like that. Maybe your life is
And I'm not saying that
that's
that's the wrong thing, but
right.
I think, I don't know. I just want to throw
So
this out there.
you're just wondering like is your question,
Yeah.
why is it that lay people can do some sins and kind of get away with it, essentially? Not to get away with it, but like they don't suffer
There's a different kind of forgiveness for
a
them.
lifestyle um, change the way a priest would
Like I said,
for
I'm not
similar sins.
saying it's just a question. Like I said, I'm not trying to make
Right.
excuses for priests. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to
No, I know.
say
No, I know.
this is the thing that like I want to see what kind of sins I can do.
Right.
But it's because we were getting into a little bit in that previous conversation.
Yeah.
I think needs to be a part of the conversation as well.
Yep.
And I'm not going to have any answers for it right now.
Yeah, I don't have
But
any
I
answers
want to
either, but I
bring
think
these
it's a good
things up.
proposal. I think it's a good question to propose. Um, yeah, I think it's a fair one. I think there are some differences again because, like for example, the analogy between marriage and priesthood is not absolute.
Right.
There has to be some different standards as well. But you're right. I think like I'm always reminded of. I think I remember hearing a story once about John Paul II. There was a man who was poor in Rome, begging and stuff like this, and John Paul II somehow came across him one day,
Yeah.
and he started talking to him. Found out that he was a priest. That for whatever reason he left the active ministry. Never sought laicization, but just left active ministry, and for whatever reason ended up on the street and stuff like this. And over time, John Paul II actually helped rehabilitate him into the active priesthood, right? And it was a beautiful act of mercy. But it is a tough question because, and again, I think it's important to just hammer this home. We're making a distinction between like a personal sin and like actual harmful stuff. Harmful stuff needs to be cast out. Like it
Right.
has to be. It has to be.
But also, okay. Oh man, I said like, so like, and I know
Yeah.
that I have accepted a heavy burden.
Hmm.
I decided to say yes to the priesthood. I have accepted a heavy burden. Other people have not accepted that. And I have accepted it in the same way that a married couple, they accept all kinds of burdens that they have no idea about until later in life, right?
Hmm.
Um, but sometimes I think as a priest, you feel not just the burden, but you can feel the loneliness of the burden.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah. It's real. It's I don't know. It's there. And I think, I mean, this might be the hard thing for maybe some listeners to understand. I think a lot of these questions really have to start in conversation with other priests,
Sure.
right?
And I'll tell you, like in my priest small group, this is the kind of stuff that we talk about, and
Right.
we can talk about it much more explicitly.
Right.
But I think I'm hoping that this is an appropriate way to kind of present these questions out there as well.
Yeah, just let people know like these, and I think it's important people to know like we're talking about this stuff. We're struggling with it. We're engaging with it. We're not just trying to ignore it. And I think actually, I do think actually that a lot of priests today really want to be good priests. They want to do a good job, and they want to take seriously a lot of the struggles the laity have had with priests. And they're trying to wrestle through it. It's just like how I think it's part of living in a moment where the church is in transition into a vastly different way of life. And how we understand that, like the days of the pastor being almost like the king of a parish are gone, right? Oh, that used to be the case everywhere.
Yeah.
Priest pastor was king,
Yeah.
and nobody could complain about him, right? And that obviously led to some really bad stuff. And so it's right to correct that. But then at the same time, then you go through the opposite direction, right? Where the priest has to become so familiar to us that he can't actually tell us what to do when the time is right. Like he, like, you know, like, I mean, like not in the sense of like
saying,
saying,
even be a spiritual authority in a sort of way.
Exactly.
He
Right.
can't
Like,
be father because
and maybe this is part of our cross as priests today. This is the suffering you have to endure, not because we've done these things, but it's a suffering on behalf of the harms the priesthood has done.
the reality is that the scandals have taken away a part of our fatherhood or a way of exercising it.
Yeah. I mean, just in terms of
cannot-
practicalities, we can't do things we used to be able to do.
Or the fact that I'm always, I very much enjoy being involved in the youth group, but I'm
Yeah.
also in the back of my head running like a tape is like, am I acting appropriately at all
Yeah.
times? Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's not like it's a temptation or anything for me, but it's
Yeah.
like, what is the perception
Exactly.
that like it's a cross that we have to bear because of the sins of others.
Yeah.
And it just is. It just is.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
not complaining about it, but it is a thing. And so I wonder, a lot of people say they want priests to be more understood or more approachable. And I wonder if we really mean that. Or in what way we mean that.
Yeah.
Or in what ways are those possible and what ways are they just simply not?
Honestly, I think the days of like, again, I might be wrong. I could be wrong. I don't think we can have the closeness we once had. And there's a variety.
To the same extent.
That's the same. It's not just because of things. It's also because of the lack of priests, right? I'm in the third largest parish in my diocese by myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to be close to everyone.
And like your situation, as difficult as it is, it's nothing compared to some of the places like in Texas or in the South of America,
where they have thousands of families in their parish. It's like, this is impossible. And then the government, and that's the other thing, right? And then for sometimes the government, it's almost takes the place of sanctifying and teaching because that's all you have every day because there's just so much of a large organization to run, right? I think, in the end, I think it's important about saying like we're trying, everyone's trying their best, and we're wrestling with the new reality. But I think it's also about recognizing the days when the priest is everybody's buddy, where he can just pop into someone's house for dinner when they feel like it. Those days are gone.
I'm not sure if that's what people want. It's what some people want, but I don't
some
think
people
that's
want
so
that.
much the
What
issue.
do you think they want?
Sometimes I think people don't know.
Right.
I think you can sum it up accurately by saying holy priest.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe this is just, like I said, hopefully some of this makes sense. I am close to a few families, like very close, where I consider myself a part of that family.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some aspects of that family where I am always going to have a distance, and appropriately so. There are some things I can call the person out on. So I'm hanging out with my buddy. He's married. The wife asked him to do something. I'm like, hey, if you go take care of this right now, it's going to make your life a lot easier later. So we can pause what we're doing and go do that thing, right? I can kind of call him out on that. But there's other aspects of that relationship that will always and appropriately be a mystery to me. But the fact that I know that, the fact that I know that there are some things that are going to be an unapproachable mystery for me because of the path that both I and God have chosen.
Hmm.
That's a part of the understanding.
Hmm.
And so there are going to be things or ways of talking about stuff among priests there's going to be a distance there.
Hmm.
But aware of that distance makes closeness more possible
Yep,
for lay people.
absolutely. Yep. And I think
And so
like
that's what I'm trying to balance with. That's why I'm talking about this on a
yeah,
podcast that all
yeah,
kinds of people listen to.
right. Yeah, it's I think the thing is to recognize though, like for sometimes like just because the priest isn't at your house every week doesn't mean he doesn't love you.
Right.
Right?
Sure.
That there are other places of closeness. Like that closeness doesn't always mean to be at your house and doing things together or whatever. That closeness is that there's a deep communion that is deeper than just physical proximity.
Yeah.
But that there's the communion of prayer and the communion of the Eucharist that
And
we share
also,
together.
that doesn't exclude moments of different kinds of closeness with different people that the Lord may
Exactly.
providentially ordain. You know,
Yep.
for example, I don't do spiritual direction for every single member of my parish.
Mhm.
The relationship I have with my directees, there's a closer relationship there.
Yeah, absolutely. And because they're going to share a lot more with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So I want to share a quote if I can
Okay.
quickly, just because it's from Ratzinger, and I may have shared it on here before, but I think this kind of speaks to what you're talking about because I want to help people understand like God's grace actually principally works when the priest is powerless. That when in our nothingness, in our weakness, even God's grace is still working. God's just because of just because a priest might be inept in a certain area or something like that doesn't mean that God isn't still at work, if that makes sense. So let me read the quote and we can maybe just chat about it for a second. This is from his Call to Communion. And he's reflecting on the apostles, but I think it applies to priesthood in general. He says, the nothing that the disciples share with Jesus expresses at once the power and the impotence of the apostolic office. On their own, by the force of their own understanding, knowledge, and will, they cannot do anything they are meant to do as apostles. How could they conceivably say, this is my body, or impose their hands and pronounce the words, receive the Holy Spirit? Nothing that makes up the activity of the apostles is the product of their own capabilities. It is precisely, but it is precisely having nothing to call their own that their communion with Jesus consists. Having nothing of their own draws the apostles into communion of mission with Christ. This service, in which we are made the entirety property of another, that this giving of what does not come from us is called sacrament in the language of the church. Sacrament means I give what I myself cannot give. I do something that is not my work. I am on a mission and have become the bearer of that which another has committed to my charge. This very self expropriation for the other, this leave taking from oneself, this self dispossession and selflessness that are essential to the priestly ministry can lead to authentic human maturity and fulfillment. And that like is a very powerful quote. But the reason I like, yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well,
Go
I
ahead. Go
think
ahead.
it brings things around, at least to the beginning of our
Yeah,
conversation,
yeah.
in that in trying to be a holy priest, which I try to do, the
Mm-hmm.
temptation can be to like, okay, every mass I have to be super prayerful. Every mass I have to do this. Every
Right.
homily has to knock it out of the park. All these things. But in order to actually be holy, you need to take a step back from that
Yeah.
and and because those ideas or that clinging is a trying to take on ministry and holiness for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the intuition that I think I got in prayer is to be a holy priest, you have to realize that you're not.
Yeah. And that it doesn't depend on you.
Right. So,
Because everything you do as a priest actually isn't your work.
right.
That's the whole point of the nothingness. But you need to be united. You have to enter into communion with that nothingness.
Right.
That is because that's where grace works. Grace works where you don't. That's the
Mhm.
whole point of grace, right?
Yeah. It's a I need to enter more deeply into my nothingness. And I think there's definitely like there's a strong analogy for just holiness in general in that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I think I see a lot of the same things in parents that I see who are amazing
Yeah.
with all their faults and everything, who are just like, am I being Catholic enough for my family? Am I doing
Yeah.
enough? And it's like we try to take on grace for ourselves
Yeah.
instead of kind of the darkness of the mystery, not
Yeah.
darkness in the sense of evil, but in the sense that you cannot see and
Right.
that you are completely empty.
Right.
And so maybe all you do is realize that I am showing up for God and for His people.
Right. Yeah. And that's it. That's the whole that a good priest is one who shows up. And that's it. Because and recognizing that it's not his job to convert, but to be an instrument and a vehicle through which Christ wants to do the work.
I think it's a cure for the anxious pursuer of holiness.
Yes. And this is Marian,
Mhm.
right? This gets back to our whole receptivity, right? Openness of heart. And this is the beautiful thing. This isn't reserved to just the priest.
No.
This is for every Catholic. Yeah.
I think that's enough for one episode.
That's plenty. That's plenty. We'll see how it goes. We'll see what people think.
Yeah, no, but I think it's let's throw some more stuff out there into this more and more. I think we as a church need to, in appropriate ways, have more and more complicated and difficult conversations.
Yes.
And hopefully this helped it out and didn't mess it up. I think it's all right.
Yeah.
So hey,
Well,
guys, thank you for listening. Please leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends about the podcast. Tell your enemies too, because Jesus says we must love our enemies. You can find me drinking coffee way too late into the evening.
You can find me at FR Harrison on Twitter.
Contact the podcast and receive updates at Clerical Pod on Twitter. Find us on Facebook, YouTube to see our beautiful priestly faces, or email us at clericallyspeaking@gmail.com. Peace.
God bless.